Hello, everyone. It's me again. And I'm here to talk to you about lesson planning. Okay, so we have an important question to ask before we start. And that is, what is lesson planning and why should you do it? So, please feel free to pause the video and try to answer this question before I talk about this. All right. So I hope you paused the video and thought about these questions before we begin. So let me just dive into this. Okay. So what exactly is lesson planning? So if you were to ask me, it's visualizing the lesson before you teach it. Okay. So visualizing the lesson, how detailed should your visualization be? Well, I'm going to say it should be extremely detailed. Um, and we'll go into that in a bit more detail as we go on in this input session. So lesson planning is a thinking skill. All right. It's in this input, I'm going to show you how to plan lessons, formal lesson plans, such as this here. I'm giving you an example. This is the lesson plans I did on my training course, teacher training course. We had to plan these, and I'm telling you, these plans took me hours to write. All right. And is this practical in um, a day-to-day situation where you're teaching 6 classes a day? The answer is definitely not in this form. However, why is it going to be beneficial for you to do this, to actually write down and think about every small detail of your lesson? Yes, this is part of why we should do our lesson planning. Okay, so practical day-to-day situations don't need formal lesson plans. Okay, usually what I do before my lesson, I will go over all the material. I'll think about why I'm using. Okay, so this is what I do practically. So I go over what I'm teaching. Okay, I check my who I'm teaching. Okay, then I ask the question, so what material is going to be useful for who I'm teaching? For example, if my course book has some materials about skateboarding, if the text is about skateboarding, and I'm teaching a 12-year-old girl who doesn't enjoy skateboarding and isn't interested in the topic, then I might have to reconsider my materials. Okay, so practically, I do this. I don't write down a long lesson plan. I check who I'm teaching, then I decide mentally the procedures and aims for the lesson. And then I teach it. Okay, so basically I check what I need to teach them. I figure out what my specific aims are and the procedures. I think about who I'm teaching. I think about it all in my mind, and then I teach my lesson. Perhaps I make a few notes, and this can take me, just doing this mentally, can take me half an hour to plan a 1 hour lesson. Okay, because I often need to plan some materials and so on before I teach a lesson. However, okay, you guys are on a course. Okay, so planning lessons on a formal teaching course, okay, needs to be specific. Okay, we need to, while we're observing you, see that you're thinking in detail about all of your lesson. Okay, so the main aim of the lesson planning I'm teaching you is to develop your skills for future so that you are able to develop very efficient, well thought out lessons without having to write them all down. Okay, but in the beginning, you have to write them down. Okay, this doesn't reflect what you would usually do. However, we're on a training course and we need to be able to see that you're thinking in detail. So let's move on. Why should we plan our lessons? Well, it helps us to anticipate important problems. Okay. And it helps you to organize your materials. It means that you have done the thinking for your plan. However, you should be careful to teach the students. Don't teach your not the plan. Okay, you're teaching your students. You might have a plan that goes wrong, or you might have a plan that you have to change in the middle of a lesson. Okay, and that's fine. All right. So now let's move on. So there are two very important questions you have to ask when you teach a lesson. Okay. That's these two questions. So what do my learners already know? And what do they need? So these two questions will allow you to plan lessons for children, for adults, for people who are studying for exams, for people who just want to learn more English or enjoy learning. So I've prepared this for you to consider. And specifically, we're going to look at needs. Okay, so let's consider the needs of these three cases. So we've got an 8-year-old child whose parents would like them to study English. We have a 20-year-old studying for the IELTS exam. They want to study abroad. Okay, this is the student's main aim. Then we have another case of a 28-year-old or older studying English because they just enjoy learning languages and they want to travel and speak to English speakers about interesting topics and so on. So consider this question. So how are their needs different in terms of the learning they need to do? Okay, please pause the video and think about this for a while. You can even write them down. What do you think the needs are of these three students? Okay, so again, I hope you've paused the video, done the writing. So let's look at this. So how are their needs different? Okay, so this 8-year-old child, the first thing I see here is that their parents want them to study English. So this means an 8-year-old child might not have the motivation that a 28-year-old has, or this 20-year-old. Both of these students have a lot of self-motivation. So they don't need that in order to learn a language. So a need of this 8-year-old child could be something like they need to be interested or motivated. All right, so this could be a need of an 8-year-old child. We'll take a look at how this affects your lesson aims specifically. Okay, then we have this 20-year-old. What do they need? They need language that the IELTS exam requires of students. They also need to practice specific exam tasks. Okay. Now we have this 28-year-old because they want to travel and they like learning languages. So what are their needs? I don't know. Their needs could be developing the ability to explain themselves logically or rationally, or learn travel. Here's a need: learn travel vocabulary. Okay, this is a simple need. They could have many other needs, but right. So let's go on. Your needs determine your students' needs. Help determine your aims. Okay, so let's go on and look at three kinds of aims that you have to think about when planning a lesson. Okay, so we've got the main aim, we've got subsidiary aims, and personal aims. So before I speak about these, I'd like you to just take a minute or two and see if you can organize these into the correct columns. Okay, pause the video try and organize them. All right, so now that you've done this, let me move them into the correct boxes here. Okay, so we've got the main aim to practice making polite requests in the context of making holiday arrangements. So this might be applicable to the 28-year-old studying because they want to travel the world and go to English-speaking countries with some English-speaking friends, perhaps. Okay, so what could be, let's take a look here. Okay. Here we go. Okay, so there you have an example of the main aim. Subsidiary aims. These are aims which are not, these are smaller chunks. So for example, practicing making polite requests is a broad topic. So however, this is not very broad. This is also specific because it's in the context of making holiday arrangements. Be careful, okay? When writing your main aims, don't be too vague. So, okay, so you'll see here, this is an example of one of the, of a lesson that I did on the CELTA. Okay, here's my main aim that I wrote on the course. Students to practice writing an email of advice and qualifying what they write and say. Okay, so this is fine, but your main aim for students to practice writing an email isn't necessarily enough for most students. Okay, for younger students, you can have easier main aims. So, for example, we see this 8-year-old child. They need to be motivated. Okay. This means your main aim could be something like to improve my students' motivation by increasing their interest in English. Okay, I'm not sure how you would do this. This would be different according to every class. If you had lots of young girls, that would be different to teaching a group of young boys. For example, then you'd have to think about different things that they're interested in. So that's fine for an 8-year-old. However, these students need more specific aims. All right. Your sub-aims are smaller things that get practiced during the lesson. So in making polite requests, okay, you have to learn could and would you. So that's part of the subsidiary aims. These are the things students have to learn in order to do the main aim. So your main aim is the thing students will be able to do at the end of the lesson. All right. Your subsidiary aims are the things, the smaller, let's say, building blocks they need to achieve the main aim. All right. Now we can look at personal aims. So these personal aims are the aims that these are your, how can I improve as a teacher? So these, you find these by looking back at your previous lessons and thinking about what you need to, what could have been improved. So in this example that's given, improving organization of the whiteboard and giving clearer examples could be personal aims. Okay. So now that we've looked at aims, we move on to the next part. Okay. So you've got your main aim, your sub aims, and personal aims. So now for the rest of this, we're just gonna go over my plans and let me show you. I'll be giving you a template of these plans. So one clear that you can fill in for your plans. Okay. So the next thing we're going to look at is the fact that you have to make assumptions. In every lesson, there are things that we assume, things that we believe the students will already know. That's, again, we come back to these first two questions. What do my learners already know? And what do they need? Okay, so the assumptions in this was a lesson I did on ed adjectives and ing adjectives. So my lesson contained these words, which I believed that my students would already know the answers to. Why is this important? Because you can run into times where when you go over this and you think, okay, I assume that my students will know the meaning of relaxing. Then you ask yourself, what if they don't? All right, so that helps you prepare a little bit better and have something. If your student asks you, what does relaxing mean? And they catch you off guard, you haven't prepared anything. They could, you can end up wasting time. You can end up giving students bad information or wrong information. Obviously, this is a simple example, but you get more complicated grammar topics and modal verbs and such that you might have to make assumptions about. All right, but this is also you need to fill this in so we can see that you are thinking about what your students already know, so that you're asking this question. Okay, then you have to also think about your board plan. What will you have on the board by the end of the lesson? So when you say, that's it, everybody, bye-bye. What will the students have seen you write on the board? This is a little bit more important, I think, in class rather than online, because board space is limited in a classroom. Online, you can keep scrolling down. All right. Materials or resources isn't too important for this course. All right, so this is the front page. These are the things that you should consider right at the beginning. Your board plan you can fill in while you're planning the rest of your lesson, once you've looked at all your activities. But these four things, sorry, these should be done right at the beginning of your lesson. Okay, then we go into the detailed lesson plan. You'll see here we've got the stage of the lesson, the aim. So don't remember this aim, so don't mistake this aim for the main aim. This aim is the aim of each stage. Okay, so why am I doing this stage? That's the aim. So okay, so I use the word stage. Stage is used here rather than activity because one stage could have many activities. All right. One stage could have more than one activity. It could have 2 or 3 activities, but you need to think about why you're doing what you're doing. So in this example, we have a lead in. This was a grammar lesson. So I did a lead in to generate interest in the topic. Okay. You should always also ask the question, how will this activity or stage affect my students' English learning? This is, if you can think about that, it will help a lot. Okay, so then we move on. You should think about the interaction. This will just give you a general idea of whether your lesson is too much teacher-based or whether you're actually keeping it interactive for your students and student-centered lessons rather than teacher-centered. This means teacher-student. That means the teacher is talking to the students. This is the students talking to each other. Usually those are the only interactions. You also get plain student. This interaction is when they're usually where they're just doing tasks on their own, individual tasks. All right. Then we go on to the procedure. Now this is where I say visualize in detail. Okay, so think about every small step of your lesson. Why do you do this? Because it will help you to see problems with your own plan. Very often when I planned these, I would think about my procedure and I would realize, wait a second, what I'm planning to do doesn't actually work in the classroom environment because I went into detail. Okay, so here's the detail that I'm talking about. You greet the students, ask them how their weekend has been. Okay, this is because I did this because I wanted them to describe the causes of their feelings. Okay, and then I spoke about my weekend using the target language. Okay, so I also planned exactly what I was going to say to my students so that I could give them an example of the target language without them realizing it. And then I asked them if they had to describe their weekend. How would they describe it? Because I wanted adjectives describing things. Okay. And also how it made them feel. So this is the detail I'm thinking of when I think procedures. So procedures are instructing them to look at the pictures, pair check, feedback. Okay. Now, I'm also thinking about the time each procedure will take because I've only got 45 minutes. You know, every lesson's obviously different. You get 1 hour lessons and so on. But you need to think about how much time each procedure will take. Okay. And you'll see I can have many procedures in one stage before we end up moving to the next task. So I had for this lesson, I had a lead-in, preparation, useful language. Then I gave them a task. Okay. And then at the end, I gave them feedback. And here's where I used my board plan that I came up with. Okay. Finally, you should also, and this is simply for the benefit of, remember, you're not going to necessarily do this formally on paper before every single lesson. All right. On the course, though, we need you to do this so that we can see you're analyzing your language properly. And this will also help you to answer students' questions when they arise. So in your language analysis, you should think about the target language and meaning. Okay, so I've got here, for my example is annoyed. I specify that it's the ed form of the adjective. And you should include examples from your context. Okay, so I specify that annoyed is the word we use for the person rather than something that is annoying. I think about how I can check my students' understanding of the meaning. So here I have a situation as my example. So this could be a few different things. Here on this lesson, I use CCQs. This is an example of checking students' understanding, concept checking questions. So I was teaching the target language maybe and perhaps. So my CCQs were, is the speaker sure of what they're saying? If they say maybe. And is something else possible? All right, so these are my two CCQs. So the answer here is no and yes. And if I got those from my students, then I could understand that they understand the meaning of maybe. So you need to specify the form of the language you're looking at and the pronunciation. Here you should be using your phonemes, your phonetic chart, and think about stress, weak forms, contractions, and so on. All right. Finally, the last part, and this is part of your assumptions, but it's a little bit different. This is anticipated problems and solutions. So an example of a problem, and this is with the meaning of the target language, okay? I anticipated a problem with the word relaxing. And I also figured out a solution to the problem if there was confusion. I had a plan ready. Okay. These plans, I mean, it's best if you don't need to use them, but inevitably you'll find students get confused in a lesson. Okay, and then it always happens. So you have to be ready with a solution to the problem. What will you do to help the students understand the meaning properly? This could be many things. You could use CCQs, for example. You could explain, you could write on the board and give them examples of wrong and right forms of the word of relaxing. There are many solutions to different problems. Okay, I also thought that there would be difficulties pronouncing the words, so I said I thought, okay, if there were these difficulties, I would spend some time drilling the words. Okay, so this is an example of a lesson plan, a formal lesson plan. I'm going to set you guys a task of writing your own lesson plan. I will send the task in Telegram, and I would like you to complete a full-length lesson plan, such as this, ready for Saturday. Okay, I'll send you the details of the lesson, the level you'll teach, and yeah, and I'll send you a blank lesson plan template like this, which you can complete. All right, so I hope you enjoyed that, and we'll spend more time learning to plan lessons this week. And this weekend, we'll plan some lessons together and give each other feedback on the lesson plans you see. Okay, so thanks everybody. Have a lovely day. Bye-bye.